How's this race shaping up? Joining me to discuss that are Katie Balls, Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, Jonathan Isaby, the Editor of BrexitCentral, and Andrew Pearce, Consultant Editor at the Daily Mail. Nice to see you all. Katie Balls, how is this contest shaping up, particularly in the wake of the election results we had yesterday?
I think it's shaping up to be a very messy, unpredictable Tory leadership contest, partly because we have so many candidates already, over 10, and we're expecting that to rise in the coming days. I mean, there's some estimates that you could hit 20. I think we could have about 15 Tory leadership candidates. I think there'll be pressure placed on some of the less likely candidates to step down before you get to the hustings point, before you get to nominations. But ultimately, I think this is going to be very vicious, and we're already seeing that with the attack lines between the Brexiteers who are willing to countenance a no-deal Brexit, and those figures like Rory Stewart, perhaps figures like Matt Hancock and now Jeremy Hunt, who are suggesting that is a careless thing to do.
View, which I imagine you would share, is that this time it's got to be a Brexiteer.
I think it has to be a Brexiteer. I think the Conservative Party membership will want someone who supported Brexit from the beginning rather than a late convert to it.
So that means Hunt and Sajid Javid, forget it.
Well, if you look at the Conservative home surveys that they've done over the last month or so, if they've done all kinds of comparisons of all the different candidates between each other, and in every single case, the person who's more Brexity wins the final ballot. And of course, this does go to the Conservative Party's 150,000 or so members in the country to make that final decision, albeit with the MPs whittling the field down to the final two.
Well, this is the most important Tory leadership contest, arguably, ever, because the party could evaporate, it could completely disintegrate. And I think it's interesting what Sajid Javid said about Brexit could be an important issue. My God, talk about understatement of the century. Brexit is hugely important in this election because 2/3 of Nigel Farage's voters in the European elections last week were people who voted Tory at the 2017 election. And if you look at Michael Ashcroft's survey of 10,000 people who voted in those European elections, he says a lot of them aren't going to go back to the Tory party, which is why they have to have a Brexiteer on that final runoff with the party members, and it's got to be a proper Brexiteer, somebody who really believes
it. Brexiteer on the final runoff, so you could see a non-Brexiteer, a Hunt figure, and...
Why not? But because the Brexiteer is going to win it. Whoever's on that last two, the Brexiteer will win it. Whether it's Jeremy, whether it's Michael Gove, or Boris Johnson or Dominic Raab, the Brexiteer win. The Tory membership is hungry for a real Brexiteer.
Is it really about ideology, or is it, as I feel increasingly, actually about the ability to communicate? I mean, Farage is a good communicator. Corbyn and they, sit in their bunker, and so it's not
terrible. She was hopeless. She couldn't communicate anything at all. And that's why Michael Gove, I think, is beginning to the odds on Michael Gove are beginning to shorten. He's a great communicator. He's brilliant in radio and TV interviews. Boris, we all know what a great showman. Dominic Raab, is he a bit dour, a bit dull? And what they will not have, in my view, the Tory party, is somebody they're not sure what they stand for. They've just had 3 years of that. It was called Mrs May.
I think there's always a tendency to try and correct your mistakes in the way of your last leader. So given that Theresa May is and was not a very good communicator as Prime Minister, I think that's going to be a big focus on that. As for, I think, people like Dominic Raab, it's interesting because I think in the past week we've heard a lot about the Stop Boris operation, so the fact that lots of his parliamentary colleagues will do anything to keep him away from the final two. I actually think now it's more the Stop Raab operation. A calculation has been made by some Conservative MPs, those who would describe themselves as moderates, the One Nation caucus, that if you have to have a Brexiteer in the final two, they probably have more in common with someone like Boris Johnson, who they think is liberal in things like immigration, than someone like Dominic Raab, who is seen as more Thatcherite.
So at this juncture, I'm not sure whether they can think in terms of a Stop X operation because they need to get enough votes to get through to the later rounds.
Your operation, BrexitCentral, are you going to support someone in the end?
I shouldn't think so. I mean, right now we're inviting all candidates to write about Brexit for us. We ran a piece by Priti Patel this morning.
She's not a candidate, is she?
She isn't at the moment, but she's a putative candidate. She's one of the people that there are others who we think might enter. Penny Mordaunt is being talked about as another person who may yet enter the race in the coming days. But I think one thing important about this race is that they do have the proper contest in the country. I think one of the big negatives of the coronation of Theresa May in 2016 was that she wasn't tested on the hustings amongst the members in the TV debates, which needs to happen in order for the Conservative Party and indeed the country to know what they're getting.
I mean, I have to say, you know, there's not involved as a nothing in politics. I just think, look at some of those names. I think, who the hell do they think they are? Why do they think they are remotely qualified to be Prime Minister at this difficult time?
I know, and what must the voters think, the public think? 10 MPs so far, maybe 12, it could go even higher. They just think and they know they've got no prospect of winning. It's all about positioning, so that if they get a few votes, they might get a cabinet job or they might not. They're taking the mick, really. It's almost like student union politics, and I think it will infuriate the public who think the Tory party is, frankly, taking leave of its senses again.
But of course, the danger of positioning, standing to get a big job, is that if you stand and get very few votes, you actually
nothing.
lose any leverage
Well,
you might
get a
have.
wooden spoon.
It seems to me, because you can't deliver your supporters.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a problem for some of them. I think the level of self-confidence of some Conservative politicians, given how the government's been really performing over the past year, is quite impressive, that they still think that these people have a good chance.
I mean, what happened to Liz Truss? I mean, she sort of crashed and burned before without even running.
Well, she's made the point that she thinks it should be a Brexiteer candidate, but there's also something which is, if you have this many candidates, lots of politicians look at Liam Fox and the manoeuvre he played last time around, where he ran for leader and he got enough nominations, I think around 15, to then get a good job in the cabinet. Now, the number of people running means that some people actually are going to have their career move backwards, I think. If you have a handful of single figures nominations, you might actually find yourself not even with a good cabinet job, just out of the government.
I mean, William Hague makes the point in the Telegraph today, saying the most powerful thing that a Tory leadership candidate should say is no, i.e. I'm not doing those sort of deals.
Well, that's probably the best thing, yeah. But talking of deals, it's all going to focus around, do we go for no deal? Michael Gove, of course, is saying he's not in favour of leaving the European Union with no deal, so he's going to have to tell us what deal he wants if he's going to be the one who gets on the
Well, also, if you do say no to deals, look what happened to David Miliband. I mean, I know it's another party, but he tried to rise above it and fell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you know, in previous elections, they've been offered chancellorships, and we thought that Amber Rudd was going to be Boris Johnson's chancellor. If you talk to Amber Rudd's people at the weekend, they said, that didn't come from us. That was people who come from Boris's camp.
You mentioned Amber Rudd because, you know, we tend to talk about the Brexiteers with all due deference, but there is this other wing, the One Nation wing of the Conservative Party. And I find it interesting because, you know, Rory Stewart, who they like, has said never Boris. But a lot of them might be quite open to Boris, mightn't they, in the end, in the circumstances?
I think definitely that group, if you look at who they might eventually back, I think they would pick Boris Johnson over quite a few of the other Brexiteers. But I think in the meantime, they will throw the weight behind a candidate who isn't a Brexiteer. And that's because when you look at that final two, you will have one definite Brexiteer candidate getting all those votes from the Parliamentary Party. The other person in the final two will be something that MPs like Amber Rudd, her group of One Nation Conservatives, will be pushing for. And I think the question is, who do they think has any chance, and it seems near impossible, of beating a Brexiteer when it gets to the Eurosceptic membership?
All right, give us a name. Who's going to win?
It's ridiculous, Adam, because the most duplicitous electorate in the whole of the world is the Tory Parliamentary Party, but I still think it's going to be probably Boris.
I think it's looking good for Boris Johnson.
Too early to say, but probably Boris or Dominic Raab.
OK, thank you all very much indeed.